Like the count every 100 years with the occasional anomaly along the way, Atari 7800 rises once again to wreak havoc on anyone who tires of Atari content on this channel. You may want to take the next month off if that's the case. Fair warning. Now that takes me back. Right, it's another Atari Age homebrew project for the Atari 700 Pro system, Dragon's Cache, released in 2020, and the first chapter of a trilogy of Dragon titles that would include Dragon's Descent and Dragon's Havoc. And looking at the screen before you, if you really need me to tell you what this particular title takes inspiration from, you either haven't played enough vintage Sega titles, or you haven't played enough bootleg Famicom cartridges. Either way, me thinks you should go to your room and do your homework. Or whatever the modern equivalent is these days, I neither know nor care. But yes, Dragon's Cache is, for all intents and purposes, a non-infringing 7800 conversion of the one-time perennial Sega puzzle game Columns. That game where you match 3 or more gems of the same type in horizontal, vertical, or diagonal lines to clear them from the board. Needless to say that if you're familiar with Columns in any of its incarnations, then Dragon's Cache should feel right at home because the gameplay is pretty much spot on. Controls are straightforward, the D-pad or the joystick moves the gems around, both buttons cycle through them, or rotate, whatever the equivalent is, and it works about as well as you'd expect controls in a game of this ilk to work. There are 3 modes of play in the single-player side of things. You obviously have a 2-player competitive mode here, but you've got Score Attack, your marathon mode where you keep playing until you eventually top out, Race Attack, where you score a number of set points in the fastest time possible, and finally Training, which is the more intriguing mode because whatever supposed line clears you do in this mode don't actually clear away but are replaced with little boxes, and when you press both buttons, you'll clear said boxes. This is apparently a component of the 2-player mode that this mode trains you for apparently. Alas, I wish I could properly convey the context of this in that mode, but I don't have an army of clones to play with, and my dog could barely hold onto a joystick, let alone use one. And, well, there's not much else for me to add here. It's Columns with a dragon motif, and quite a competent version of it as well. Honestly, I would have just called this the 7800 equivalent of magical jewelry, but that would be a disservice to Dragon's Cache, which comes across as far less thrown together than that pirate original. But no, in terms of replicating the gameplay, it does a fine enough job of it, controls pretty well, though it doesn't have the hectic pacing of Columns where the drops would fluctuate between fast and slow and who knows what. Dragon's Cache maintains a nice steady increase in drop speed as you go up in level, and if you fancy more gems to play with beyond the initial 4, you could go up to 5 or 6. Dragon's Cache sports some fairly basic but otherwise clean looking graphics. The gems are nicely rendered. I appreciate the grid-like background on the well. I enjoy the simple dragon serpent things on the side that changes colors as you pass through levels. It's not a spectacular looking game, but it really doesn't have to be. It just needs to communicate clearly what's going on, and it does just that. As for sound, well, you've got a couple tunes to cycle through, a couple of which are actually quite catchy, which is quite the accomplishment for a non-Pokey 7800 game. Pokey being the enhanced sound chip they'd used in certain games so that they don't sound like slightly enhanced 2600 games, which is usually the case with the 7800 sound output. The sound effects are a little underwhelming, and I kinda wish there was more pomp and circumstance for exceptional plays, but no real loss otherwise. Apparently, if you have the Atari Vox accessory, you get some vocal bits, but I don't have that, so I guess I'm missing out. Or not, it really doesn't matter. Overall, Dragon's Cache is a good take on Columns for Atari 7800, and if that's all you want, then that's all you're getting. It's not a reinvention of the wheel, it's not taking what came before and building on that foundation, it's just a solid recreation of a classic game under a different name. It's available on Atari Age for purchase in cartridge form, though it's up to you to decide whether it's worth the $30–35 last I checked, to play on Atari what you could equivalently play elsewhere for far less under far better deals, i.e. any Sega Genesis compilation that has come along these past few decades or so. Either way, it's another Columns-like game done well, and that's about it really.